Let's paint a watermelon slice with watercolor. Colors we're using is cadmium red, permanent rose, Winsor yellow, Winsor green, and ultramarine blue. Any of those colors will work. You don't have to have the exact ones. We're going to mix the blue and green for the rind, the yellow for the white part of the rind, and then the red and permanent rose for the meat of the watermelon. We'll also be mixing the blue and the green to make the black for the seeds. And grab your paper and your brush, and let's get started. First, we're going to sketch out lightly a triangle, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Mine sure isn't. And go across with a diagonal line there, a shorter one. And down at the bottom, we're going to make one at the same angle as the top, but a little bit longer. So it's wider at the base. And then we're going to connect the two. And it'll be narrower up at the top. Again, they don't have to be perfect. And we're going to make a little angle there. And we're going to come across with a slight curve down at the bottom of the triangle. And then we're going to take the very bottom line of the triangle and make that curve there. Just kind of rounding it out. And the last little bit that we're going to do sketch-wise is we are going to draw in our watermelon seeds. They're like little teardrops, and you can put them anywhere you want. You can put as many as you want, or you can only put a couple. It's all up to you. It's your watermelon slice. I'm going to add a couple over here on the side, one inverted, and then I think up here at the top, just make one that looks like it's poking out a little bit. And we're done with our sketch. Now we're going to take the brush and with some water, we're going to go across the upper triangle part, leave some dry areas and some white space for highlights later. And I'm just kind of going along here, adding water in different places. I'm leaving white around the seeds. Now I'm going to grab the cadmium red, add some more water. This is a very watered down wash. So it'll be really light. You can test it on another piece of paper. And then I'm just dropping in the color. And again, it doesn't have to be perfectly placed. We're going to be doing this in layers. And I'm just painting around the seeds, around the lines, leaving some white spaces, and bringing some color down. And still just bringing that light wash down. Now I'm going to go over to the side there and start adding some color in there. Now if you do paint over any of your highlights, it's very easy to just take the brush, get it in some water, and then wipe it off where it's just a little bit damp, and then go over the color and you can lift it out. If it's a very high staining color, then you could go later on and just use some white gouache or a white gel pen and add in your highlights. So don't worry if you color over all of it. It's not a big problem. You can fix it later. And now I'm just going in with a little bit more of the red paint. You can see over here I made a boo-boo and I'm just lifting it out with a damp brush. And I wanted to pull a little bit more highlight here, lighten that up. And again, just using a damp brush. And then we're just going to let this dry. And once it dries, we'll go in with a second layer of the cadmium red or any red that you have. I did decide to lift out a little bit more of that color using a tissue. And now it's going to dry. Now that it's dry, we're going to go in with another layer of the cadmium red. It's still fairly watery, but it's not soaking wet. And you don't want to scrub over the other paint or you will lift it. I'm just kind of glazing over. Now we're going out over the side, darkening things up, giving some shape to this watermelon slice. And remember to leave your highlights. And just kind of brushing over. I'm leaving around the seeds again. I'm leaving the highlights on the white. And if you do happen to paint over them, that's okay. You can fix it later. And this doesn't have to be perfectly smooth or anything like that. It's just a quick watercolor. And with the little layers over each other, it does add some texture and gives a better appearance of the watermelon. And I'm going along just defining the bottom here, darker areas. Kind of painting around highlights. We will be using another layer and going darker, so some of the areas that I have colored over will still appear lighter. And if you don't like something you did, just take a damp brush and you can lift that paint out. Now we're going in with another layer of the cadmium red. This one's not quite as diluted with the water. This is going to be a little bit stronger, and you can test it over on a test sheet or scrap piece of paper. I'm going along the edges here, and you can see it's quite darker. I'm just using the tip of the brush here, along outlining, and then really laying in some more definition with the color. Again, leaving space around the seeds. Going along the edge here. Painting in over here. Next around that seed. I'm leaving this edge a little bit lighter than the rest because that's where the light's coming from. And I've kind of gone over my highlight here, but I'm okay with that. Just darkening it up down here at the bottom and blending it in a little bit. Again, leaving some white space around those seeds. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you do go outside when your lines, just lift the paint with your brush, a wet, damp brush, and a paper towel or a tissue. And I'm going in with the last layer of the red. I'm kind of defining this edge here. I'm just kind of trying to give it a little bit of that glossy feel, like it's wet. And I tend to fiddle around a little bit. I'm just kind of painting as I go. Adding some more color here. And a little bit down there in the corner. And you can stop if you want, or you can keep going. Now that layer is going to dry, and now I'm going into the permanent rose. Any pink you have will work. You can even use yellow. It'll make it appear a little bit more orange, but we work with what we have. I'm just glazing over, it's a watered down mix of the permanent rose. I'm kind of going over the darker areas and then some of the highlight. And this will give a little bit more dimension to the watermelon, just like when you see it in real life. It's not just one straight red color. And we're just trying to add those varying colors. Again, I'm leaving the space around the seeds. And coming in a little bit more on some of the white with just that permanent rose. And you can add as much as you want or as little as you want. If you don't want to use the pink at all, you could just use the red. And I'm going along here with the permanent rose. And I did overpaint my highlight there, so I'm using a damp brush to kind of pull that out. Now that it's dry, we're going to add one more layer of the permanent rose. Darken up these edges. And get a little bit more pink over some of these highlights. And you can take your time here. Now I'm watering down the mix a little bit more, and now I'm going to go over on the side. I wanted a lighter wash of the permanent rose. With watercolor, you can always go darker, but it's hard to lighten up. So that's why we're layering. And you do want to start from light to dark with watercolor. Just build layers. And remember, nothing needs to be perfect. Mine certainly isn't. It's just more about just learning how to layer and how much water to use on your brush. And just a little bit of brush control. And some color mixing. And adding a little bit more of that pink over here. And I think we're just about done with this. I'm not sure I can fiddle with this much more. One last layer after that dries, we're going to use just the red again. Darken up. I lost my edge over there that did have the highlight, and so I decided to bring that back. We'll just go over with a darker, non-diluted layer of the red paint. And just bringing out some more of that watermelon with the lights and the darks to try and make it look like it's wet and glossy. And just a little bit more over here. We're going to find this side. A little bit across the top again. And we're done with the reds. Now we're going to get some Winsor green, or a sap green will work, any kind of light green. And we're going to dampen up the brush. Come in, I'm adding a little bit of Winsor ultramarine blue. I didn't want it quite so green. And it is a watered down version. So now we're going to go along that very bottom edge there. And if you go over the line or anything, just take a damp brush and you can lift it out. And we're going to let that layer dry. And you can either let it dry by air or use a heat gun or an air dryer. Just be careful not to push around paint. I'm going in with another layer of that green blue. And I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to pull up a little bit more green up top. Go back in and darken it up one more time. And that was just the straight green. I'm just kind of tidying my edges. Rinse off the brush and grab some ultramarine blue. We want it kind of wet and diluted, and we're just going to go with that ultramarine. I got it a little bit too wet. Add a little bit more, and we're just going to go in down on the very bottom where the rind is. The skin of the watermelon is usually darker. And we're just going to tap that in. Real light strokes. Watercolor dries lighter than what it does when it looks wet on the paper. So that blue is going to dry a lot lighter, so will that green. And here I'm just kind of blending them and pulling up some of the extra blue. And you saw me just kind of lift out a boo-boo there. Now I'm going to take the medium yellow or Winsor yellow, and I'm mixing it. It's a very wet light wash. And we're going to go over the white here and then over the green. And if you get some up in the red part of the watermelon, that's fine too. It'll just make it turn a little bit more orange. And then down in the green, it just kind of brightens it up and adds another layer. The yellow is very transparent, so the green is still going to show through. And I'm just going in with a little bit more of that yellow along the rind. I like how that's looking. Do a little bit of touch up here and there. I'm happy with that. And I'm just going to add a tad bit more of the green. Now we're going to paint the seeds. So they don't have to be perfect. The mix is that sap green and the ultramarine blue. And mix them until you get that very dark color. I don't use blacks because they tend to be really flat and dull looking. So I mixed up my own. Paint them and leave a little spot for a highlight. Makes it look like the seed is shiny. And again, if you do paint the whole thing black, you can still go in with a white gel pen or some white gouache and paint your highlights in. They are teardrop shape, so I'm just trying to get that in there. And they don't have to be perfect either. And you can go in with a lighter wash than I did with more water on your brush, and then just layer these like we did the red and the green. Now I'm going in with a more saturated wash, less water on the brush, a darker color just around the outside right edge to get a little definition there, almost like a little shadow. And you can see that mix up there of the blue and green. You could just use a really dark blue, or you could use ultramarine and add red to it to make it a darker color as well. And I'm just letting this layer dry. And now we're just going to go in with the ultramarine blue and add a shadow down at the bottom. The light's coming from the right. We're just going to anchor it to the page. And then while it's wet, go up and grab a little bit darker. That wasn't dark enough. I'm going to grab some more paint. Like that. And then I'm just going to come in underneath it again. Just add a little bit more of that shadow. And then I'm going to rinse off my brush and come back in with just a damp brush and kind of smooth that out. Just kind of going up along the edge here. And there we have it, a watermelon slice in watercolor. Thanks for watching.